Good evening and welcome to The Simple Truth. Today is October the 22nd, 2007. My name is Bob Dacy, and we've got three topics tonight. A little bit about Ron Paul, a little bit about some cancer propaganda, and we're going to play part two of the Shannon Simpson story, anecdotal, personal story about a cancer survivor. We played part one last week, so we got to go with part two this week. Okay, first off, Ron Paul. I got a few excerpts on a read from some articles that have appeared recently about Ron Paul, whose candidacy is just exploding, and it's really cool. This is from WorldNet Daily, written by Ilana Mercer. Ron Paul's electability. And let me just read a few excerpts from this thing. Paul, talking about Ron Paul, his stance on Iraq makes him appealing to voters from the left, the real right, and the center. He can thus also lower the Republican Party's considerable attrition rates. Like or dislike him, Ron Paul is the only Republican presidential contender whose position on Iraq comports with that of the American people and hints with electability. This may surprise conservatives, but bar Tom Tancredo, Paul is the only candidate who will seriously reduce undesirable immigration. Here, as on Iraq, Americans are united. Paul takes one of the toughest positions yet. He is the only candidate who's vowed to eliminate all of the incentives that keep unviable immigrants coming. Best of all, Paul will actually have the funds to plug the border because he refuses to remain mired in Mesopotamia. All Republicans on the ticket, bar Paul, will be bogged down in Iraq for years to come. Having squandered men, material, and morale there, they'll be less able to respond to an attack on the homeland. The paradox of the peace-loving Paul is this. Given his commitment to national sovereignty, to defending this country, not Israel, Iraq, or Afghanistan, Paul will have the will and the wherewithal to smash any enemy entering our orbit. So there you have it, some good press from WorldNet Daily. Another one here, this is from truthnews.us, which is one of Alex Jones' new websites. Well, that camera looks funny. Ron Paul videos gets dig #1 story this month. I think there's something wrong with that camera. There we go. Basically, that's the story. Dig's #1 story this month was Ron Paul, a Ron Paul video, and they're everywhere. It's just the candidacy is mushrooming all over the place. Here's another one. Hope we can read this thing. Ron Paul stings Hillary Clinton on Iraq war and warns of a draft. This is from Craigslist. Sounding like a candidate that can win his party's nomination, Paul said, quote, "She voted for the war now. She says she can't get the troops out until 2013, and she won't rule out a military first strike against Iran." So now Ron Paul is starting to turn his guns on Queen Hillary, because he is sounding like a candidate who can win the Republican nomination. Here's another one. This is from politicalderby.com. Ron Paul wins conservative leadership conference straw poll. Another poll, another one he wins. Final results, breaking news. Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul has won the inaugural conservative leadership conference straw poll. Full results, Ron Paul 32.8%, followed by Mitt Romney 16.1%, Duncan Hunter on down the line, blah, 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 blah. So there you have it. Once again, Ron Paul exerting his considerable following. I mean, they're out there and they're growing all the time. This is from USADaily.com. Ron Paul has mandate for equal time during Fox News debate. And this is by Marty Els. Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul has broken through to the top tier of Republican candidates running for president. He knows it, the GOP voters know it, and as previously reported, media outlets are grudgingly admitting it. And Ron Paul's campaign points out that 4 candidates are now viable at this time in the Republican field. Of course, Ron Paul, Rudy Giuliani, Fred Thompson, and Mitt Romney. That's all. And Ron Paul is broken into the top tier. How about that? Now, speaking of which, there is a website that you need to go to, or I would suggest that you go to. You don't need to, but I would suggest you go check out www.thisnovember5th.com, and the 5th is 5th, www.thisnovember5th.com. Some of the Ron Paul fundraiser people have decided to try to raise $10 million in one day. Wow. Please join us this November 5th for the largest one-day political donation event in history. Our goal is to bring together 100,000 people to donate $100 each, creating a one-day donation total of $10 million. So go to www.thisnovember5th.com and participate in this awesome, exploding Ron Paul revolution. Okay, and by the way, Ron Paul has introduced a bill in the House, this one right here. You want to call your congressman and stuff to tell them to help to sponsor this or vote for it, H.R. 3835. And what this bill is introduced by Ron Paul on the 15th of October, a bill to restore the Constitution's checks and balances and protections against government abuses as envisioned by the Founding Fathers. And the title of this bill is the American Freedom Agenda Act of 2007. So call all your congressmen there and your senators if it gets to the Senate and tell them to back this bill. What this does is it gets rid of all this horrible nonsense that's been going on in relation to what Bush has done since 9/11. You know, Military Commissions Act, writ of habeas corpus, torture, coerced confessions, illegal intelligence gathering, presidential signing statements where he can just blow off the law if he feels like it, torturing people abroad, messing around with journalists, using secret evidence to do trials, saying, sorry, no, we're going to go back to the way the Founding Fathers intended it. So you want to back Ron Paul's bill, H.R. 3835, all right? And you can call these fellows Doggett and McCall and Smith and Carter and even Kay Bailey, who, by the way, is not in the Council on Foreign Relations anymore. She quit. And John Cornyn there. Give him a nice positive pat on the back and say, support Ron Paul. Okay. All right. Now, next topic. As you know, we've been replaying a show we recorded in 2003 and played in 2005, the Shannon Simpson story. And what prompted that was this Proposition 15 that's coming down the pike in Texas in the November election. And we, of course, are against Proposition 15. And there's a lot of reasons why, but I want to pontificate here for just a minute. There was an article in the Statesman which occurred recently, which is similar to this one from the New York Post, which came out October the 16th. This one right here. Same basic article. Winning the war on cancer, death rates plummet. The concentration there is the word plummet. Okay? Now what they're saying in the article is that the death rates dropped from what it was before, which was a drop of about 1% a few years ago, to a drop of about 2% now. So you have a 1% increase in the rate drop. What I'm saying is this is bogus. This is not true. It's a big fat lie. And the reason I say that is because you can't use the word plummet when you have a 1% drop in something. You know? Like, for example, let's say you owed $100 to somebody and you paid back $1. Well, your debt hasn't plummeted. I'm sorry. The word plummet doesn't apply. You know, let's say you have 100 steps to climb, or let's say you have 100 steps to go down, and you take 2 steps. No, that's not plummeting. So the mainstream media uses this deceptive language to make you think that traditional cancer cures are working when they're not. It's like, oh, well, gee, a few years ago, 500,000 people died of cancer. And this year, only 495,000 people have died of cancer. Oh, look, the death rate is plummeting. No, I'm sorry. That is not a plummet. You know, so that's one thing I wanted to point out. this evening. And also, you got Proposition 15 there. I'm going to be talking about that here briefly. Say no to that on the November ballot, because guess what? The reason you should say no to it, well, is because they're barking up the wrong tree. That's all there is to it. This is an article from the Statesman. Opposition to cancer research plan grows. Yeah, that's true. And the Libertarian Party of Texas, Patrick Dixon, chairman, had a press conference on Friday, and we're just play you a short segment of that. And they've come out against Proposition 15, and let him talk about it. Go ahead and play that clip, guys.
So Wynn, I'm the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Texas.
You don't have to look at me because I think they're funny to look down, but yeah, Dr. over there, what brings you out here today?
Texans are generous and compassionate, and we support the organizations that are doing research on Alzheimer's, AIDS, heart disease, and cancer. But we don't appreciate it when Rick Perry puts a gun to our head, takes $3 billion out of our pocket under the premise that only government can provide medicine. Hillary Clinton and Rick Perry may think that only government can provide medicine. Libertarians disagree. We're concerned for the organizations that are raising funds to solve the problems with AIDS, with Alzheimer's, with cancer, and other diseases like that. The $3 billion...
Okay, that's enough of that. Libertarian Party's come out against it. I was there, I covered it. The problem is they're coming out against it for good reasons, but not the real reason. The real reason is because traditional cancer research doesn't work. Okay? It sucks. The track record is awful. It's disgusting. It's horrible. And all it does is take money out of your pocket, $3 billion worth, and funnel it to a bunch of doctors who are going to live off this stuff for 10 years and increase their funding so they can be financially viable and come up with a bunch of research which is only marginally effective at best. That's the history of traditional cancer research. It is abysmal. It is abysmal. And, there's a lot of articles in the paper now trying to promote this thing, trying to get you to vote for it. Here's one from the other day. Here we go. Survive cancer your way. Mine suits me just fine. And this woman is talking about all the friends that she's lost and how important it is, you've lost so many friends to cancer. Yeah, that's because they all went to traditional medicine. Here's a guy, a 5K walk for cancer research. They're really promoting this thing. This guy's a survivor of 5 years. Yeah, and if he falls down and dies 5 years and 1 day later, they count him as a cure. They're talking about all these dead people and how we got to help. But what you can do to help is not do traditional medicine. And that is why we're playing the second half of the Shannon Simpson story tonight. Again, let me recap that. Shannon Simpson is Kelly Taylor's little sister, and she was diagnosed with cancer in 1983. She was a student at Southwestern University in Georgetown. She was 20 years old back then, diagnosed with metastatic cancer. They did a radical hysterectomy on her, and she woke up to a death sentence, basically, because it had already metastasized to her liver. And basically, that means you're dead. Look it up. Metastasized cancer. What are your chances of survival? Well, the doctor said, well, you need the chemo and the radiation. And she said, no, we're going to Mexico. So they went to Mexico, and they did lateral treatment at the John Richardson Clinic. John Richardson was the lateral pioneer in the 70s in California. And the FDA crucified him and kicked him out of the country for saving people's lives, for curing people of cancer with lateral. Well, that was in 77. A few years later, 1983, Shannon Simpson shows up down there with her parents, having just been diagnosed with metastatic cancer. She was down there for a couple of weeks at the Richardson Clinic. She came back to Austin to continue her studies, had a doctor administer her maintenance doses for a while, and I interviewed her 20 years later, ladies and gentlemen, totally free of cancer, totally cured, and never did chemo, and never did radiation, all that barbaric garbage that they want to fund with Proposition 15. So this is an anecdotal story, but it's true because it's It's not just somebody who dragged off the street. This is the little sister of Kelly Taylor, who was one of the producers of this show. Their whole family lived through this in 1983. So we played the first part last week, and of course we're fixing to play the second part now. And it is so important. This is a true story, and it's a believable story because it's true. We didn't just make this up. And, you know, The Simple Truth is now on Google Video, so, you know, you can tell people to go to Google Video and type in Bob Dacy Simple Truth, and you can watch this thing. It's going to be up on the net in a couple of days. Or you can go to our new website, which we're working on, which is simpletruthonline.net, not .com, simpletruthonline.net, and you can watch part 1 and part 2 of the Shannon Simpson story. But for right now, watch this. This is vital stuff. This is Shannon Simpson, interviewed in 2003 on The Simple Truth.
Special edition with Shannon Simpson, our guest, a woman who has survived cancer, and we're going to start another segment. I want to follow up, Shannon, with something we were talking about before. We established that the fact that your family had membership in the John Birch Society was instrumental in the fact that you went to Mexico and got cured of cancer with Laetrile. Now, why does membership in the John Birch Society accomplish this?
Well, I think most of all because we had access to information that most of the general public doesn't. We had access to information that was outside the establishment through G. Edward Griffin's book, World Without Cancer, through doctors who were fellow members who were also of the same mind of, you know, breaking traditional boundaries and bucking the rules a little bit, and just the access to information was the biggest thing.
So it was the access to the information.
Right.
All right, so it's an information war that we say we're in, and I guess knowledge is power. And in your case, knowledge is life.
And knowledge is life.
Wow. Now, we've been talking about Laetrile, but we really haven't said what Laetrile is. And we're going to try to give you a non-clinical definition. Shannon, can you jump in here and explain Laetrile? What is that?
Well, Laetrile is actually the brand name, if you will, as my sister said it, of a naturally occurring substance called amygdalin, and its vitamin equivalent is B17. There's also there's a whole subgroup of vitamins, pangamic acid, which is B15, and then they all belong to the same family. But amygdalin is a cyanide equivalent, which is found, as I said, is naturally occurring in vegetable matter, plants, animals. It's in the world, and it's part of our natural world.
Now, you said cyanide. Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hang on just a second now. Cyanide is supposed to be the big killer. That's what you kill people with when you want to do away with them. And it's in the movies.
Right.
Now, the question is, well, how is the cyanide in Laetrile not kill you?
Well, because it's in such tiny doses, for one thing, I think. Here again, this is the non-clinical layman's version of what I understand to be correct. But it's if I understand the chemical composition of the cyanide or its equivalent in the amygdalin substance, is actually what goes in and bonds to the cancer cells inside your body and kills the cancer inside your own cells.
Well, that's the way I understand it. The way it's supposed to work, from the way I understand it, is the cyanide is bonded to another molecule, and it just would pass harmlessly through your body unless it ran into some cancer cells.
Right.
At the cancer site, it chemically reacts to the cancer, releasing the cyanide at that point and killing only the cancer.
I think.
Now, that's pretty much the way it works. And so I've heard, cyanide, that's the big scare. That's the big boogeyman. And how dare you put cyanide in your body? But it's the same argument, from what I understand, that you put chlorine in your body. Chlorine gas will just flat kill you.
Right.
But the chemical composition of table salt is NaCl. The chlorine is bonded to another molecule, to another atom, so guess what? It's totally
Sodium
harmless.
chloride. Right.
Sodium chloride is harmless. So that's an analogy as to why the cyanide in Laetrile doesn't poison you.
But that is one of the scare tactics that doctors and the FDA will use to discourage people from pursuing Laetrile, and one of the pieces of information they use to undermine the veracity of the clinical trials and things that have.
Now you were talking about it's also called vitamin B17. Now, how do you go about? You had cancer, you got it, right? It was too late for you to not get it.
Right.
How do you not get it in the first place using B17?
Well, you take it like you would a vitamin. Take it as a maintenance dose. 2 capsules a day or whatever.
Well, now, the problem with that, of course, is that it's not legal.
Yeah, that is a hitch.
that's a little problem here. Now, in my research, I have learned that this amygdalin is in a lot of things that we eat. The problem is
Absolutely.
it's in some of the things we eat, we don't eat that part of it. For example, it's very prevalent in apple seeds. So an apple a day keeps the doctor away if you eat the whole apple. Right?
Right.
It's in peach pits. There's a little kernel inside that hard seed inside of a peach. It's high concentration there. And it's also in extremely high concentration in the seeds of apricot pits.
Exactly. I believe that's the highest naturally occurring concentration.
Right. And Dr. Krebs, who was one of the Laetrile pioneers, claimed that if you ate about 7 of those little kernels every day, you'd never get cancer.
Wouldn't that be a great world?
A world without cancer. But gee, that would sure mess up the medical establishment, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Think of all the money.
Speaking of the medical establishment, I have some quotes that I want to read to you, Shannon,
Okay.
from various members of the medical establishment. And I just want to get your response to this. I have a little blurb from the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center off of their website. And Sloan Kettering is the biggest cancer research center out there, if you know anything about this. Since 1884, we've been dedicated to improving the understanding and treatment of cancer. Our dedicated team of professionals is committed to providing the best cancer care anywhere.
I haven't heard them use the word cure yet.
Care. Well, they've got a photograph of a bald kid smiling. He must have had chemotherapy and all of his hair fell out, but he's in a real good mood here on the front of this website here. I was just wondering whether or not these people give better care than what you got in Mexico.
I don't know, maybe they serve steak dinners in the room or something.
I don't see how they could be giving better care than you were given in Mexico, because you're sitting here next to me 20 years later. Now I want to read again from Sloan Kettering's website their clinical summary of amygdalin, which is of course another word or name for B17 or Laetrile. Excerpting from the clinical summary. Research has demonstrated only the absence of beneficial effect. Oral administration has resulted in cyanide toxicity and death. Amygdalin is illegal in the United States. Patients should not use this supplement. Shame on you.
Yeah, I wish I could say on public television exactly what I feel about that.
Well, I mean, you're violating what they said here, Shannon.
Yeah. How dare I?
Here's another quote. It has also been postulated that cancer develops due to deficiencies in vitamin B17, but no data substantiate this idea?
Horse hockey.
Do you know who Ralph Moss is?
Yes, I do.
Who is Ralph Moss?
Well, he wrote a great book.
Yeah, he did. He wrote this book right here. This book right here, The Cancer Syndrome by Ralph Moss. Now, what does that mean? Who is Ralph Moss?
I don't know anything about him other than he wrote the book.
Well,
so
I'll tell you something about Ralph Moss. Ralph Moss, many, many years ago, was the Assistant Public Affairs Director of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute. He was there during the Laetrile studies, which they did back in the 70s. There was their chief researcher, a Japanese-American doctor by the name of Kanematsu Sugura, was conducting extensive trials on the use of Laetrile in laboratory mice. Mm-hmm. He was having phenomenal results. The people at Sloan Kettering were very excited about this, all the people working with him and everything, and they could see all these wonderful results that Laetrile was having on these tumors in mice back in the 70s. Well, the powers that be didn't much care for their results, and so they kept duplicating his work with less and less and less Laetrile in the experiments until the experiments finally failed. Now, Ralph Moss's job was to communicate press releases to the public. And Laetrile was making quite a stir back in the late 70s in the United States. Well, Mr. Moss had to quit because he called his own press conference and exposed the fact that they had deliberately sabotaged Segura's work, and he couldn't, in good conscience, be a public information director of an organization that would torpedo the truth. Now that's Ralph Moss.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. Now, I have something from the National Cancer Institute, another establishment pillar in the medical profession. Mm-hmm. And let me read from their website. Laboratory and animal studies have shown little evidence that Laetrile is effective against cancer. Have any studies of Laetrile been conducted on people? Case reports are available. They provide little evidence to support Laetrile as a treatment for cancer. Now, what are you? Chopped liver?
That's what I'm wondering.
This is absolutely staggering. It really is. Shannon is not the exception to the rule.
No.
She's not the exception to the rule. And for these establishment organs that falsify data, they're making this stuff up. There is little evidence to support Laetrile as a treatment for cancer. All right, I've got something here from the New England Journal of Medicine.
Oh, another one of my dear friends.
1982. Dr. C.G. Mortel, who was one of the principal doctors at the time responsible for smashing Laetrile as a treatment. Let me read a few words from his statement about Laetrile. No substantive benefit, hazards of amygdalin, cyanide, toxicity. Amygdalin, Laetrile, is a toxic drug that is not effective as a cancer treatment.
I wonder what they call tamoxifen, you know?
Well, I don't know.
It's pretty toxic.
Well, I don't know. That's right there from one of the main guys that was responsible for submerging Laetrile as a treatment and making it illegal in his country. Here's another one from a D.M. Greenberg, another one of these doctors This is from 1980, the case against Laetrile, the fraudulent cancer remedy. You were cured by a fraudulent cancer remedy, Shannon. The writings of Laetrile proponents are filled with erroneous and absurd statements. The propaganda for the doctrine of freedom of choice in cancer treatment deludes many individuals with treatable cancer to reject proven methods of treatment. What are your comments on that?
Well, if they're so proven, how come almost everyone who walks into cancer centers across the country doesn't come out alive?
Well, you have to understand, our viewers have to understand what proven means. Proven, it sounds so great, right? Mm-hmm. It's been proven. Proven in the medical industry means that a big, giant, multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company has spent $100 million or so on a bunch of clinical trials that nobody else could afford, and the FDA has come along and given their work their blessing. The seal of approval, proven. It doesn't mean proven to work. It doesn't mean that. It means given the FDA seal of approval. That's what it means. And the problem is that something simple, something natural, like a vitamin B17, guess what? You can't, there's no money in it. That's part of the problem. There is no money in it. Who's going to spend tens and 20s and $30 million and whatnot, $100 million investigating the efficacy of a simple vitamin when you can't patent it, you can't charge people out the nose for it, and there's no money in it? I mean, the people don't understand the medical industry is an industry. It's a business. And they're looking for customers. And guess what? You're the customers. And if something as simple as vitamin B17 comes along, which could eradicate the problem, that's not good for the bottom line, is it?
There goes their market.
There goes the market. There goes the customer base. And at one level, that's part of the problem.
Oh, I think it is the problem. I think it's, well, certainly.
Well, what do you think of the FDA? I mean, Food and Drug Administration, they're supposed to be the czar of all this stuff. They're the ones that, put the blessing of the Pope on everything. Now, what do you think of the FDA? I mean, if you listen to them, you'd be dead.
If I listen to them, I'd be dead. I consider them and the rest of the medical establishment one of my worst enemies. Because they literally keep information from the public. Cancer is a curable disease, just like a cold, or, well, not the common cold.
That example.
The flu, glaucoma, diabetes. All these things are curable. They are not the death sentences or the unhealthy life sentences that we're going to.
Okay.
It's just.
Why in the world would the government, the U.S. government, the chemical pharmaceutical industry, work that hard to suppress something like Laetrile? I mean, at one level, of course, there's a financial motive. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, we live in an information world, an information society. Everything gets out with lightning speed if everything is right. Why work so hard? Why did they attack Dr. Richardson? Why did they revoke his medical license? Why did they basically kick him out of the country? Why so hard?
Well, I think the bottom line is the main reason, because there are so many multi-billion-dollar cancer centers all over the United States and all over the rest of the world.
But what about the Hippocratic Oath?
What about?
Do no harm. It says do no harm.
I truly think most doctors are duped by their education, that they are taught and they're funneled and channeled through traditional medicine, through the American Medical Association. They're taught to toe the line, and they are, after all, playing with people's lives. You don't want to step too far out in exercising your judgment on those things. But I also think that there is a greater conspiracy at work, a conspiracy of fear. If you can keep people afraid and afraid of a disease and afraid of their own death and afraid of taking risks, then you can control them to a certain degree.
And that dovetails with what I said at the beginning of this presentation, that you have a moral problem here.
Very much.
Again, they're not just passively ignoring you. Mm-hmm. They're actively seeking to suppress the information which can cure you or prevent you from getting the disease in the first place. Mm-hmm. One of the common comparisons with vitamin B17 is vitamin C. Mm-hmm. You know, for hundreds of years, sailors would get scurvy, that terrible disease. You always hear about that scurvy crew of pirates or whatever. And it took them a while back then, but they finally figured out that if you had limes aboard the ship, hence the British are called limeys, limes or lemons or oranges, guess what? You didn't get scurvy. It was that simple. And so when they figured it out finally, they would have a store of limes or lemons or oranges aboard their ships. No more scurvy crew. Same thing with vitamin B17. You eat the right foods, no more cancer. But again, we live in an information age, and the fact that more people don't know about this is a staggering indictment upon some very, very, very morally challenged people at the top of the food chain. Now, don't you think that's tantamount to murder?
Just about.
I think it is. I think it's tantamount to murder. I mean, what else can you call it? You know, and you know, who do you blame? I wouldn't blame the doctors either. I think that doctors are basically raised in a box. Mm-hmm. You know, you have this box, and the box is provided by the chemical pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. They're the one that fund all the you know, when you publish your parish when you're in school, all that, and you stay within the box. And if you stay within the box, you behave yourself, you know, you'll have a nice practice and you can treat people and all that. And most of them don't even know they're in a box, because that's all they've been exposed to. A doctor's not some great genius. He went to school. And when the schools are funded by the medical pharmaceutical industry, guess what they produce? They produce someone who comes out and treats symptoms of diseases rather than causes. Mm-hmm. And what does he treat them with? He treats them with expensive prescription drugs. Expensive, patentable, money-making prescription drugs. That's what doctors do. They write prescriptions. That's what they do. Well, you got this problem, here's a prescription. That's what they do. They send you to the pharmacy. And in that way, you are, as I said earlier, a host, and they are the parasite. I have become to believe recently that the FDA, as the guardian of all this, exists primarily to keep you away from anything that will keep you out of the hospital, out of the doctor's office, and out of the pharmacy. Because everything that they protect is patented chemicals which are concocted in a lab. Now, Shannon, let's change gears a little bit here. Are you familiar with a fellow by the name of Jason Vale?
No.
Okay, you know, we've been talking about your situation 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. 1983. You went to Mexico, did the Laetrile treatment, and were cured of metastatic cancer. Mm-hmm. Statistically, you're not supposed to be sitting here.
That's right.
If you're in the traditional medicine box, you're gone a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Now, well, that was a long time ago. We must have made a lot of progress since then, right? Wrong. We haven't made any progress. I have a couple of things I want to share with you from the FDA's website. This was a press release that they released on July the 22nd, 2003. President of Queen's firm found guilty of criminal contempt for violating court order not to market bogus cancer cure over the internet. Jason Vale got cancer many, many years ago when he was young. And eventually he stumbled onto what your parents knew about. Amygdalin, apricot seeds, the whole 9 yards. He was also a world champion arm wrestler, by the way. That's his, other claim to fame.
Wow.
And he was cured of cancer. And I think he got the idea that maybe he could make money selling apricot seeds, amygdalin, Well, they had a problem with that. And I want to excerpt from this press release. Mark B. McClellan, Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, announced today that a federal jury in Brooklyn, New York, has convicted Jason Vale of 3 counts of criminal contempt. And basically, they had issued an injunction ordering Vale and Christian Brothers, his company, during the dependency of a civil suit, not to directly or indirectly sell, distribute, package, label, or promote Laetrile, also known as amygdalin, vitamin B17, or apricot pits. Laetrile is not approved as a drug for the treatment and prevention of cancer, and evidence introduced during the civil suit demonstrated that Laetrile has no known effect on cancer. It says it right here. And that it is highly toxic. Moreover, when cancer patients take Laetrile, they often forego conventional medical therapies until it is too late for these therapies to be effective. So, gee, in your case, boy, if you'd read this press release 20 years ago and believed it, we wouldn't be sitting here today, would we?
True.
He continued to sell Laetrile in complete disregard for the court's injunctions. He continued to tout Laetrile as a cure for cancer and further announced that there were other companies that still sold it. So this fellow, Jason Vale, was just convicted a few months ago of selling the stuff that saved your life.
Well, and selling the stuff that's found in apricots in fruit bins all across the nation. What a crime.
That's terrible. Now, I want to read a quote from Commissioner McClellan from their press release. Commissioner McClellan, by the way, is the son of Carol Keaton Rylander McClellan Strayhorn, who is somewhat highly placed in Texas government, former mayor of Austin. She's also, she's got a current title, I can't remember what it is. Comptroller of Public Accounts. Oh yeah, that's right. Comptroller of Public Accounts. Her son, the FDA commissioner, said this: the FDA takes seriously its responsibility to protect patients from unproven products being peddled on the internet by modern-day snake oil salesmen such as the defendant in this case. There is no scientific evidence that Laetrile offers anything but false hope to cancer patients. Janet?
Well,
I guess you're not scientific evidence, huh?
I'm not.
I guess not.
The sad thing is there are lots of books and things out there that you can find, and people can read.
Yeah,
They
well,
can just find them.
well, that's a good thing. The internet is a wonderful thing.
The internet is a wonderful thing.
And although you have to be careful about what you read on the internet, it doesn't take you long to figure out that we're scratching the surface, just scratching the surface of a very, very, very big and very, very ugly beast. I have another, speaking of strange websites, there's a website called Quackwatch. Are you familiar with that? Quackwatch blasts everything that's not traditional medicine.
Okay.
Everything. It's quite amusing to go there, because anything that's not traditional medicine they go after. I want to read a few excerpts from Quack Watch about this particular case with Jason Vale. Online Laetrile vendor ordered to shut down. Cyberspace vendors beware. Sell illicit drugs online, and be prepared to be shut down. And shut down he was when drug supplier Jason Vale used the internet to promote the sale of a false cancer cure. Whoa. The New England Journal of Medicine concluded that Laetrile is not effective as a cancer treatment and can be harmful. In fact, once it breaks down in the intestinal tract, Laetrile releases hydrogen cyanide, which can result in deadly cyanide poisoning. Yet Vale sold it to desperately ill cancer patients. Hey, that's what you're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with here. A medical establishment that actively, maliciously goes out and tries to suppress this information. I want to read a quote from Linus Pauling, who was a two-time Nobel Prize winner, one of these super scientists. He was a real proponent of vitamin C. I want to read a quote from Linus Pauling. It's right on the cover of Ralph Moss's book, The Cancer Syndrome. The revelations in this book about the ways in which American people have been betrayed by the cancer establishment, the medical profession, and the government are shocking. Everyone should know that the war on cancer is largely a fraud, and that the National Cancer Institute and the American Cancer Society are derelict in their duties to the people who support them. Linus Pauling. All right. Shannon, you're sitting here before me, a cancer survivor of 20 years. Now, since the definition of cure in the traditional field is you live 5 years, you've been cured 4 times. I mean, you know, by something that the medical establishment says doesn't work. And you're not the exception to the rule. Now, Shannon is living proof that Laetrile works. This information has been suppressed for decades by the medical establishment. For decades. The average person doesn't have a clue. She's supposed to be dead. This lady sitting next to me is not supposed to be here. And not only that, the analogy that I brought forth at the beginning of this presentation about the 3 parties, one's got cancer, I'm the party that establishment, I know how to fix it, I'm just not telling her. And then the third party coming over to help her, and I go out and I mug the third party so that they can't tell her. That happened. It almost happened in Shannon's case. Dr. John Richardson, the Laetrile pioneer, was mugged, legally mugged in this country in 1977 for curing people of cancer with Laetrile. They tried to shut him up. And they did shut him up within the borders of the United States. But he went across the border to Mexico, and a few years later, Shannon came down there with metastatic cancer, cancer literally all over your body. And she went through his program. She was there 2 weeks. And she's sitting here in front of us today. The FDA was the mugger. They tried to silence the doctor who saved her life. How many people do you think, how many people have died because of this? How many people weren't as fortunate as Shannon? How many people are dead now because the medical establishment kept this information from them. It's affected you. I know it has. It must have affected you. You know somebody, probably several somebodies, that have died of cancer needlessly. And again, I come back to what I said at the beginning. In order to suppress a cure for cancer, you have to be morally bankrupt. I don't care. So what? You can't make money. So what? It goes way deeper than money. You must be totally devoid of conscience. You must have no conscience in order to keep this information from people. You must view people as cattle, as a commodity, something to be milked financially, and then discarded. I can't come up with a kind explanation for this, given the information age that we live in. So you see what I'm trying to say here is you cannot ignore these people, these international bankers, these globalists, these New World Order types, by hiding from them. Because, as I said before, they're killing you right now through suppression of information that can save your life. And you can fight it. You can fight it, because information is power, and that's what we're about. The simple truth in our small way. We've tried for over 4 years now on topics too numerous to mention to wake you up as to what's going on around you, so that you can help, you can participate in waking up and stopping it. Information, in this case, is what we're about. And sometimes, if you have the right information, you can live. In Shannon's case, she had the right information 20 years ago, and she's alive today. What we're talking about here, the broader picture, is codified in the Declaration of Independence and in the Bill of Rights are your God-given rights as a human being. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, Shannon's family knew about that, and the information gave her back her life. That's just one topic, one small topic in this struggle against the New World Order crowd. Shannon, any final thoughts, any closing thoughts, anything you want to make sure that our audience understands about your experience?
Yes. If I were able to say one thing that, and since I am able to say it, I will say it. Cancer is a curable disease. I'm living, walking proof of that, and there are hundreds and hundreds of others out there that who need that encouragement, and who need to know that they don't have to die. And there are books available. I believe there's a resource list in the back of this book. Is there not?
Oh, there's lots.
There's lots of resources in here,
so
and there are
books.
lots of books, and there are a lot. And the best thing people can do if they know someone who has cancer, if they have cancer themselves, is to become their own advocate, become their own doctor. Don't take anybody's word for it. They know their own bodies better than their doctors do. And they need to inform themselves, and it's better not to do anything than to pursue a traditional therapy, or to take a doctor's word for it, because chemotherapy and radiation can make you ill, it can kill you, it can destroy your immune system so that nothing would work. And my advice to anyone who's struggling with cancer or struggling with trying to get information about how to cure themselves is, if you're going to do something, do nothing first, and then pursue finding out everything you can you can, everything you can get your hands on, everything you can know, tap into. You guys in Austin are in such a wonderful place for this, because Austin as a community is real open to non-traditional medicines. There are lots of alternative practitioners here. And in fact, after I came back from Mexico, there was a wonderful doctor here whose name I won't mention because I don't want to get him in trouble, who was willing to take the Laetrile that I brought back from Mexico and continue my treatments long beyond the prescribed time, so that I could be sure that I was getting the best treatment. And I could go back to school. That was a big thing for me too. So there are lots of people who will come out of the woodwork if you're willing to look for them, if you're willing to find out, if you're willing to do the footwork yourself. And I would say do it.
Definitely. Well, Shannon, listen, I really appreciate the fact that you came all the way from Louisiana to visit your big sister.
Yeah.
And come here on the Simple Truth special show that we've done in order to relate your story, because it is one example of irrefutable evidence that what we've said here is true. There is a cure for cancer. As a matter of fact, in other shows, there are a lot of cures for cancer. The problem is they're all outside that box that the AMA and the National Cancer Institute and Sloan Kettering and all the cancer establishment keeps the doctors in. So once again, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
For Jeff Kantoff and Kelly Taylor.
Okay, that was Shannon Simpson's story part 2, which we aired in 2005 and which we recorded in 2003. And again, I want to stress that, it's an anecdotal story. It's totally true. And it's personal because that young woman is Kelly Taylor's little sister. And, if you're curious about this topic, and really who isn't, I have a website you might want to visit. Just show you this right here. It's cancertutor.com, Alternative Cancer Treatments Information Center. You can go to www.cancertutor.com, and this website is basically like opening a new book or something. It's like, oh my goodness, look at all this stuff. See, Laetrile is only one thing. It's only one thing. It's one method that works if properly administered or whatever. There's so much stuff out there, and what it all has in common is that you can't patent it. It's cheap, and it works. And the chemical pharmaceutical company can't make any money off of it. There's a lot of things out there that are effective as preventative or as curative substances to attack cancer. And just learn, just learn, because it's taking you outside that box those doctors are educated in and putting you into a whole new world of naturally occurring substances which are no longer in our diet. So, at any rate, we're out of time again. For Jeff Kantoff and Kelly Taylor, this is Bob Dacy, and we will see you again next week, and also on the internet, Google Video.